I know I've made a video that's similar to this before, but I just want to approach it from a more general perspective. It'll be talking about Japanese buses. Because of Japan's narrow roads, they actually have to use buses that are less than 12 meters. So, Chugata bus, it it makes up like the majority of Japan's bus fleet. So, this one is the majority. And Kogata bus, it's Hino Poncho or the new BYD. I think it's like a K8 or something. I don't remember the exact bus model. Then there's also Hino Lies, as well as Mitsubishi Fuso uh, Aero Midi, but the smaller ones, not the bigger ones. So every single bus that you see in Singapore right now, except for the BYDs on 825, they are actually classified under Ogata Sharyo, which means they're like 12 meters, or like double-decker buses, even though Japan doesn't have many double-decker buses at all, like at all. And bendy buses are also considered Ogata. So when you have a bus that's actually 12 meters, it is actually quite a big deal, and Tokyo Bus has quite a number of these, and I think there are some that run in Shibuya. I've talked about this in the previous video, but Shibuya has many buses to like stations along Den Toshi line, Toyoko line, and there are some to like Inokashira line and Odakyu line as well. And that is because the trains are like way too crowded, and then they need a bus alternative as well. So there are bus services to Yoga. I'm not sure if there are buses to Futako, Tamagawa. And then along Odakyu line, there is one bus service, I think 54 to Kyoto. And then there is 11 to Denen Chofu. And I think that's pretty much about it. Oh wait, there are buses to Nakano, and there's also one bus that has one departure per day. It runs all the way to Chofu along KO line, which is very far. That's why it only runs once per day. So again, I've heard a lot of comments saying that oh, buses in Japan, they take you from one train station to another, and that's completely false because I've said this before. The general rule is that less than 40% of bus services, they take you from one station to another, and most routes they just start from like the bus terminal, and then they end in the middle of nowhere. And there are also some buses that start in the middle of nowhere and end in the middle of nowhere as well. Internationally, it's called low entry and low floor, but Japan's equivalent of low entry is actually called non-step. And what they mean by non-step is basically the area between the entrance door and the exit door. There are steps like leading up the aisle to like the seating area, like the area with the most number of seats that are not priority seats, but generally when they mean non-step, it's just door to door. And then for 100% low floor buses, they call them full flat buses. Scania 28 N280UB、 こちらが公式の名前なんですけど、多くの日本人は、ああ、こちらがスカニアフールフラットバスですよ。So the thing is, even though you are correct, there are still people who they just flat out insist that it is called Scania full flat bus, and I don't really understand why. So again, the same thing. There aren't many full flat buses in Japan, or like 100% low floor buses in Japan, and when they do debut, it's actually becomes quite a big thing. So I'm not sure why Japan decides to use like terminology that's like different from the rest of the world, but I mean, it's coming from the same country that calls a rapid bus service a BRT, even though it is nothing like a BRT at all. It's just there for like marketing purposes. They just want to market it as like, oh, it's a fast bus service, that's all. Haha. The reason why it is such a big thing whenever a fully low floor bus debuts in Japan, even though fully low floor buses have existed like ever since like the past 2 decades or so, but the reason why it's such a big thing is because Japan, like their buses, the bus operators, they really how do you say it? They really focus a lot on safety, and they just have the general drive to like they want to eliminate as many steps from the buses as possible. And what I mean by that is that they want to eliminate as many um, as many steps from the aisle area. It's not necessarily the sitting area because it's like on the wheel arc you still need a step in order to reach the seats for like fully low floor buses. But when it comes to entrance, exit, and then in the front area, the aisle, they really want to eliminate as many steps as possible. So that's the general consensus. To the point where in Japan, you're actually not allowed to move about, like stand and walk around in the bus when the bus is in motion. You can do so when the bus is idle, like let's say you want to change your notes to coins, you want to change your 500 yen coin to smaller coins so that you can pay the correct fare, especially if you boarded from the middle door and stuff. I'll talk a bit more about that later. But generally, if you want to ask for directions and you want to change your seats, you're only like permitted to do so when the bus is stationary. And I have seen like actual Japanese commuters being scolded by the bus driver, bus captain, like over the announcement system, not like individual scolding or whatever, but it's like they just broadcast the bus driver just broadcasted telling them not to be impatient, not to rush, just wait until the bus it has come to a stop fully before you even stand up. So that's how much they like pride about safety, because in Southeast Asia like Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, stuff like that, you can actually move about the bus freely. Like nobody really cares. And then for bendy buses, you know the articulated section, the one where there's this like huge sort of like turntable, you can say. So in Southeast Asia, you're actually free to stand like in the so-called turntable area, the articulated section. But in Japan, standing here is actually prohibited. And that's the reason why when it comes to like declaring the capacity of a bendy bus in Japan, the number tends to be lower simply because this area is actually out of bounds. What I mean by out of bounds is that like you can cross it, no problem, but you're not allowed to stand there like at all. It's the same thing for like the gangways in the trains. You can stand there in like Southeast Asia, but in Japan, more often than not, there's actually a door separating. Okay, let's say this is a train, not a bus. They actually have doors like blocking off the articulated sections, the gangways, and to cross from one side to the other, you actually have to pull the doors aside and pull the doors aside. So you're actually not allowed to stand like inside this area. I once made a mistake, but yeah, you're actually not allowed to stand there for like buses and trains, except for like the buses that are put on display, like they are preserved but not really preserved. They are converted to like restaurants. You know those red London double decker buses in Japan. I don't know how they even got it, but basically aside from those buses, a lot of Japanese people, they genuinely have never seen a double-decker bus in real life with their own eyes. So when these people they come to Southeast Asia, they are actually really surprised and they often want to ride on them. So the reason why there are no double deckers in Japan, okay, there are some for you know the interstate routes, not interstate, but like the routes that bring you from one prefecture to another. Some cases they actually have double decker buses, but in most cases they don't. They just use regular coach buses or like high decker buses, which are not double decker buses. The the bottom area is for you to like store your belongings, your luggage and stuff, and then that's a high decker bus, not a double decker bus. But the reason why there aren't any double decker buses in like commuter routes is because on average, I'm just saying on average, there are long distance commuter bus services, but since most of them are short, there is really no reason for double deckers to be like deployed at all. And the other thing is that Japan really doesn't want to deal with like staircase accidents. And not just that, generally, most of the people who are taking buses, who are commuting via bus, are usually uh, the elderly or the students like primary school, I mean elementary school, middle school, high school, or university students. It's mostly students and the elderly population, or people who are like lazy to walk, or like people who are actually disabled and they cannot walk long distances. They actually have to take the bus. So yeah, I mean, for disabled passengers, they would show the bus driver a card, like a disability card, and then they they get like they only pay 50% of the full fare. So because of like set demographics, not just narrow roads, not just like the emphasis on safety, like them wanting to eliminate as many flights of stairs as possible from their buses. That's the reason why, you know, whenever there's like a manpower shortage, if they really cannot add additional buses due to like manpower constraints, they would actually think of bendy buses and not double decker buses. Simply because nobody is gonna go to the upper deck for journeys that are less than 5 stops. And the thing is, if you actually introduce these double decker buses, I think you might get sued by the residents if an injury or accident happens. So they just don't want to take that risk. They want to confine their double decker buses to the so called interstate routes. That's why. In Southeast Asia, this one would be called the back door, but in Japan, this one is actually considered the middle door. And the reason why it's called the middle door is because it's not just because it is literally the middle door, but the reason why people there don't really say back door is because, okay, it involves a little bit of history as well. So in the past, there was no such thing as a middle door. If you go to like prefectures outside Tokyo, like Ibaraki and stuff, you might see buses whereby they have an actual back door, like located at the end of the bus. So this was like the predominant door configuration for buses in the past. But nowadays they've like shifted to a more I don't know if this is correct, but they've shifted to generally a more European approach to buses. Oh, that's not even true. Basically they've changed everything to, you know, just front and middle door. In the previous video where I talked about the fare system, I also talked about which one is the exit and which one is the entrance. So there is like Saki Barai or like Mae Nori which means you alight, you board from the front and then you alight from the middle door. Let's just say the back for simplicity. And then there's also Naka Nori, which means you board from the middle, you board from the back and then you alight from the front. So if you're boarding from the if you're boarding from the back and alighting from the front, more often than not, you tap in and then you tap out. This one is actually quite simple. And then the Mainori, you tap in at the front and you don't tap out when you exit from the back. This is done for bus routes with flat fare, which means like Toei bus, Yokohama City Bus, Yokohama Municipal Bus, whichever you prefer to call it. Sotetsu buses also has a lot of flat fare routes. Some routes, like from Kanachu, some of their routes whom are actually transferred over from Yokohama Municipal Bus, they actually retain the flat fare. So yes, in Yokohama area, for some Kanachu buses, you actually are able to take a flat fare bus for long distances. So when you board from the front, there are generally two patterns. The first one is flat fare. And then there is another kind which is like kind of like stage fare, but stage fare in this case just means that you have to tell the driver like where you're going before you tap in, because somewhere along the route there might be one increment or like two increments in, or like a few increments, but because these buses, they don't want to waste their time to configure them so that they, it's backboard front light, it'll be too confusing for passengers in the case of like Tokyo Bus. So they implement stage fare for like their longer distance bus services, and you just have to tell the driver where you're going and you just have to tap once at the entrance, that's all. And if you board from the back, it is always stage fare. So you tap in and then you tap out. It's quite simple. There's only one card reader, by the way, in Japan. It's not like in Southeast Asia where there are like two card readers per door. No, that's not the case. There's only one in Japan. And there is this one exception for Sotetsu bus at Ebina, whereby up to this day, I still don't understand how that fare system works, but you board from the back door, but you don't tap in at all. You only tap out at the front. So Sotetsu bus, Ebina area to be more precise, only this area has this kind of like weird configuration. And there are even weirder ones. Like Chiba Kotsu, you board from the front, you alight from the front. Except at the terminal where they allow you to alight from the back as well. And at Chiba Kotsu, they have like one card reader here and another card reader here. So generally when you board, you tap on this one, and then when you alight, you tap on the one that's like near the bus driver. Again, I don't know why they implement this. I don't know what is even the purpose of this. Maybe it's to save the number of times the back door opens and closes, but I don't know, this one is just weird. For bendy buses, it's similar. If you board from the back, you alight from the front. But from the back or the middle door, you alight from the front. And then if you board from the front, you can alight at the middle doors. But at the terminal, you can alight from the front door as well. I've talked about this before in the previous video in much greater detail, but I mean, it's similar. And then in the previous video, I've also talked about how do you determine whether a bus is a bus route you bought from the front or you bought from the back door. So I've talked about this like in greater detail in the previous video already, but again, I'm just gonna summarize for you. I'm just gonna give you a few examples. So Toei bus. Okay, I should say this is bought from the front. And then Yokohama municipal bus. I'll just say Yokohama city bus. And then some Kanachu routes that are taken over from Yokohama city bus in the Yokohama area. And then there's also Enoden bus, but only within Totsuka area. And then from the back, okay, maybe I should say Tokyo bus as well. Okay, and then from the back, you have stuff like Kanachu bus, and then you also have Enoden bus outside of Totsuka. And then you also have like Nishi Tokyo bus, which is like Tokyo West bus. And then Odakyu bus. And then there are some which are different. Keio bus. Tachikawa bus, I'm not really sure, but yeah. Kokusai Kogyo bus, I'm also not really sure. And then there is this one. Keisei bus within Tokyo prefectures. You bought from the front. And Keisei bus within Chiba prefecture, you bought from the back. But there are exceptions. Like, you know, I've talked about this in a previous video before, but Makuhari 01, it can be either a front board or back board. So towards Zozo Stadium or Kaihin Makuhari, it is boarding from the back, but towards Makuhari Hongo, it's boarding from the front, alighting from the back. Oh yeah, there are some more as well. Tobu bus has both. Seibu bus also has both. It depends. But generally, nearer to the Tokyo city center or nearer to Yokohama, they tend to be like boarding from the front. But away from it, like you know, the suburban areas or the countryside, they tend to be like boarding from the back. And that's because buses in the countryside, they tend to have like way more fare stages. They need to like they need to earn more money per passenger. So that's the reason why a lot of buses outside of Tokyo, like in the suburban areas, it's okay, again, with a few exceptions, it's actually boarding from the back and alighting from the front. And if I'm not mistaken, Tobu bus actually has fare stages. For certain routes in like Ayase, you board from the front, you have to inform the driver, like you have to tell him or her like you have to tell them where you want to go, and then they would set the correct fare for you, and then you tap. Or if you're paying by cash, you just tell them where you're going, and then you pay by cash. Singapore has TRF, which is an abbreviation for transfer, meaning you can carry the fare from one ride to the other. But in Japan, there's no such thing unless you buy like a monthly commuter pass, concession pass, or something along those lines. So you have to pay for like every single ride separately. The only instances whereby there are actual TRFs is, I think, along Tokyo Metro. If there's like an unpaid link or something, yeah, you can TRF. I get this a lot. So, do you actually have to seek permission to film the front views? The answer is no. You do not have to. It's not necessary. Okay, it is a nice thing to do to like inform them or to seek permission from them, but again, it's not a must. But some of them they are just a little conscious and they don't like people filming, even though you're literally only filming the front. They might stop you for whatever reason. But I'm just saying, in general, you don't have to. So just depends on case. But basically, the community is like in Japan is like kind of split about this. But yeah. So I'm telling you from my experience, no, you do not have to seek permission. But um, some of the drivers might be a little bit more cautious or like conscious about people filming. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Because in Southeast Asia, you can film all you want. Nobody really cares. The one thing is that a lot of routes in Japan, they don't get like the front view documentation, so I kind of have to do it for everybody. Okay, and again, from experience, most of them they just like let you do whatever you want to do as long as you're not like inconveniencing other passengers. And most of them are friendly. It's just the select few who are like, middle age boomer men that they just don't like it when people film. Ah. Oh yes, I forgot about one thing. Most buses in Japan now are still manual, which means they have a gear stick, but nowadays they want to shift it towards a AMT or just pure automatic transmission. So yeah, in general, the frequencies for Japanese buses and trains, they tend to be quite bad, especially in the suburbs, because uh, lower population density, they kind of want to fill up all the buses and trains as much as possible. Although I think Chiyoda line is way too overcrowded, especially Joban line through services. When you get to trains that terminate at Kita Ayase or Ayase and the following Joban line through service, it is packed to the door and I hate it. So yeah, basically in general, the frequencies are quite bad. The connectivity, like within the suburban areas, it is quite hard to access places. Like the accessibility in general is quite bad. Okay, except like Katsushika Ward or Keisei Bus Makuhari 01, which has like Sitaroji, like bendy buses. It has bendy buses every day, full day, from I forgot when is the first bus to 11 p.m. or 11:30 p.m. So yeah, they have it good. But if you don't live along the routes whereby the bus is quite frequent, yeah, good luck to you. And the final thing is, you might have this burning question: why are Japanese buses like the poles, the grab poles, or hand grips always orange in color? So in the past, there were like a wide variety of how to say. Their buses came in like a wide variety of colors. I mean the interior design. It's like the seats weren't always blue. There was like green. I think green is what was chosen in the past, and they paired green with silver grab poles. And then there's like purple and pink as well. Okay, but I think most of them are green. So it's like either green, because it's easy to see, and then the poles are silver. But over time, they decided to change the seat color to blue. I'm not sure what's the exact reason, but again, I've done some research on this, and the real reason is because since the seats are blue, they want the complementary color. You know the color wheel thingy, the opposite colors. It is simply that reason. Because the seats they are standardized to become blue, that's why the poles are orange. So It might sound weird, but that's actually the explanation as to why Japanese buses, they kind of have the same interior design scheme, like for most of them. It's like a generally white or light gray interior and blue seats, orange poles. Okay, unless you're talking about the Scania N280UB. For Toei Bus, it is red poles and yeah. My voice is cramped today because I have a cold.